Have you ever had a creative idea come to you quietly? Maybe while you were walking, or driving, or taking a shower, or sitting with your morning pages. And for the brief moment, something inside you whispered, try this, write this, go in this direction. But almost immediately, another voice appeared. That's not practical. You're not ready. You're not good enough. Someone else has already done it better. Or maybe later. Week 7 of The Artist's Way is about learning to recognize these two voices. One voice creates, the other voice hesitates. One voice listens, the other voice judges. And this week is about learning which voice deserves your attention. Hi, I'm Leslie. Over the past year, I've been guiding deep dive sessions into The Artist's Way, helping people move through different stages of creative recovery. And week 7 is called Recovering a Sense of Connection. This is a very important week because it shifts the focus from effort to receptivity. It's not just about doing more, it's about listening more deeply, listening to inspiration, listening to intuition, listening to that quiet, creative voice beneath the noise of the inner critic. And Julia Cameron explores this through four powerful themes: listening, perfectionism, risk, and jealousy. At first, these may seem like separate topics, but they are all deeply connected because each one affects whether we move toward our creative life or away from it. Let's begin with listening. One of the most important lines in this chapter is this: art is not about thinking something up, it is about the opposite, getting something down. That line completely changes the way we understand creativity because most of us think creativity means forcing an idea, trying harder, reaching upward for something brilliant, or straining to create something original. But Cameron suggests something very different. She suggests that creativity is more like listening, not forcing, not grabbing, not manufacturing. Listening. The idea is already there. The story is already there. The painting is already there. The song is already there. Our job is to become quiet enough to hear it and then brave enough to act on it. This, this is why the morning pages and the artist dates matter so much. The morning pages, they help us hear past the censor. They help us move through the surface noise of complaint, fear, resistance, and judgment. Artist dates help us listen to inspiration. They fill the well. They bring us back into contact with curiosity, with wonder, with delight. So, even though these practices may not look like making art, they are deeply connected to making art because they train us to listen. And listening is one of the core creative skills. Julia uses the image of dropping down into a well, as though beneath our ordinary awareness, there's a stream of ideas that's already flowing. And when we listen, we begin to tap into that stream. And I love this image because it takes the pressure off us. Instead of asking, how do I create something brilliant? We begin asking, what is trying to come through me? And that is a very different question. It is less forceful, less anxious, less ego driven, and much more creative. Many of us have had this experience. A sentence arrives. A solution appears. A phrase comes fully formed. A next step becomes clear. And we call it inspiration. But Julia suggests that this is not rare. This is actually how creativity works. The challenge is that we often stop listening. We dismiss the idea. We explain it away. We overthink. We wait for creativity. But creativity rarely arrives with certainty. It comes with possibility. And possibility requires trust. This week invites us to listen for the small inner voice. That small inner voice that says, do this, try that, say this, follow this. And the more we listen, the more accurate that listening becomes. So here's the first reflection for this week. What idea keeps returning to me? Where am I ignoring my intuition? What might happen if I trusted that quiet voice a little more? Now let's move to the second major theme of the chapter, perfectionism. And this is perhaps one of the biggest creative blocks. And Julia Cameron is very direct about it. She describes perfectionism as a refusal to let yourself move ahead. That is a very important distinction because many of us think perfectionism means high standards. We think it means we care. We think it means we are disciplined. We think it means we want to do good work. But very often, perfectionism, it's not about excellence. It's about fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being judged, fear of making mistakes, fear of beginning, fear of finishing. The perfectionist does not move freely. The perfectionist loops, fixes, adjusts, revises, questions, and starts again. And often, the perfectionist never completes. The perfectionist wants the first draft to be final, the first attempt to be impressive, the first effort to be worthy of praise. But creativity does not work that way. Creativity needs room to be messy. It needs first drafts, it needs rough sketches, it needs awkward beginnings, it needs experiments, it needs mistakes. One of the most powerful lines quoted in this chapter is from Miles Davis. Do not fear mistakes, there are none. Imagine creating from that place. Imagine how different your creative life would feel if mistakes were not proof that you were failing. What if they were simply part of the process? What if they were information? What if they were movement? What if they were the way the work teaches you how to continue? Julia makes another important point. Perfectionism is not humility. Sometimes it's actually pride. Because a part of us wants to be above the beginner stage. We want mastery without awkwardness. We want success without uncertainty. We want the finished product without the vulnerability of the process. And because we cannot guarantee perfection, we hold back. Or we keep improving the same small part of the work. Or we never let anything be finished. But at a certain point, creativity requires us to let go. A painting is never perfectly finished. A book is never perfectly finished. A video is never perfectly finished. A piece of work simply reaches the point where we must release it and move on. That is part of creativity, letting go. So here's the second reflection for this week. What am I postponing because I fear doing it badly? Where has perfectionism become procrastination? What would I do if I didn't have to do it perfectly? And that brings us naturally to the third theme, risk. Julia asks a very powerful question in this chapter. What would I do if I didn't have to do it perfectly? And the answer she gives is simple: a great deal more than I am doing now. A great deal more than I am doing now. That is the truth for many of us. If we did not have to do it perfectly, we would try more. We would experiment more. We would begin more. We would allow ourselves to be learners. We would take more creative risks. But most of us are very skilled at talking ourselves out of risk. We imagine the embarrassment. We imagine the criticism. We imagine looking foolish. We imagine failing. And then we stay inside the boundaries of what feels safe. But safety can become very expensive. It can cost us growth. It can cost us joy. It can cost us discovery. It can cost us the life we actually want to live. Julia reminds us that in order to do something well, we must be first willing to do it badly. This is such a simple truth, but it is also deeply comforting. Because the ego does not like being a beginner. The ego wants to look competent, polished. The ego wants assurance. But creative growth, it asks for something else. It asks for willingness. Willingness to try, willingness to not know, willingness to be awkward, willingness to take a small leap before we feel fully ready. Another powerful quote from this section from Agnes Damil: the artist never entirely knows, we guess. This is such an honest line. We guess, we try, we experiment, we discover, we adjust, and then we try again. Most people, we wait for confidence before taking action. But confidence usually comes after action, not before. You become confident by doing the thing, not by waiting until fear disappears. Another quote in this chapter says, take a risk a day. One small risk, one bold stroke, one step that stretches you slightly. This is a beautiful practice because risk does not have to be dramatic. It may be sending an email, signing up for a class, sharing a piece of writing, trying a new form, a new format, making a first video, returning to something you once loved, or admitting to yourself what you actually want. A risk expands your self definition. It tells your system, I am more than the limits I have been living inside. So, the third reflection for this week: what risk am I avoiding? What risk are you avoiding? What story are you telling yourself about failure? And what small, brave action could you take this week? And now we come to the fourth major theme of this chapter: jealousy. And this is one of the most surprising parts of the chapter because Julia completely reframes jealousy. Most of us, we feel ashamed because of jealousy. We think it means that we are petty or ungrateful or small or unspiritual. But Julia says something very, very different. Jealousy is a map, and this is powerful. Jealousy is a map, not a verdict. not a flaw, not proof that something is wrong with you. A map. Jealousy often points towards something you secretly want, something you admire, something you have not yet given yourself permission to pursue. Someone else's success may be activating your own unlived desire. That does not mean you want to take something away from them. It means there is something in their life, their courage, their expression, or their visibility that is calling to something in you. Jealousy is often a mask for fear. Fear that we cannot have what we want. Fear that there is only room for one. Fear that someone else's success means less possibility for us. But this is the lie that jealousy tells. It narrows our vision. It makes us believe there is not enough room, not enough opportunity, not enough recognition, not enough space. But the truth is that there is room for all of us. And the way out of jealousy is not shame, it's action. When jealousy appears, we can ask, what is this showing me? What desire is hidden underneath this feeling? What action could I take toward that dream myself? That is why the jealousy map exercise is so powerful. You name who you are jealous of, you name exactly why, and then you choose one action you can take in the direction of your own creative risk. And that changes jealousy from poison into information, from comparison into guidance, from resentment into movement. Jealousy becomes fuel. So here's the fourth reflection for this week. Who am I jealous of? What exactly do they represent to me? And what action could I take toward that desire myself? Week 7. It's really about connection. Connection to inspiration, to intuition, to imperfect action, to courage, to your own desires, and even connection to the uncomfortable emotions that may be trying to guide you. Creativity is not something we force, it is something we learn to listen to. And the more we listen, the more connected we become, not only to our art, but also to ourselves. So, if you take one thing from this week, let it be this: your creativity may already be speaking. The question is whether you are willing to listen. Thank you for joining me for week 7 of The Artist's Way. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And what would you try if you didn't have to do it perfectly? In the next video, we'll move into week 8, recovering a sense of strength. I'll see you there.